Hi, I'm Bryce Crittenden.
Hi, I'm Caroline Land, and welcome back to EPL's Overdue Finds.
Happy New Year, Caroline, and Happy New Year to all of our listeners. Caroline, how are you today?
I'm doing well. I hope everyone is picturing us with our party hats on, maybe a glass of ginger ale or something bubbly.
Yeah, absolutely. It is. It's funny because this is actually our 99th episode.
Yeah,
Caroline, the notes you sent me,
yeah.
you mentioned that this is the Gretzky episode.
Yeah, I think this should be a thing. I think that's what
Yeah.
podcasts should call episode 99.
Yeah, this is, I mentioned this during our last episode. This is actually one of my favorite episodes of the year that we get to do. There's kind of annual ones that we do and the kind of the best of the year. And that's what's so cool about the end of the year, obviously like the holiday season. And we start getting all these like really great lists of like, oh, these were the best moments of the year or items of the year. And that's what we're going to be chatting about today is kind of our picks for the best, our favorite, not really the best, but these are our favorite items. We've got a couple of great guests joining us today. And first, we want to welcome back to the show. He's the manager of the Stanley A. Milner Library. And he was actually last on our show called The Library is Open, talking about the opening of Milner. Please welcome back Richard Thornley. Richard, how are you today?
I'm great, Bryce. Thanks. How are you?
Really good. And of course, it wouldn't be a true best of the year episode unless we have this next guest joining us. She's the associate manager of the Stanley A. Milner Library. And this is actually the fourth year in a row. I can't believe we've been doing the podcast this long that she's been on our best of episode. Please welcome back Nancy Sheng. Nancy, how's it going today?
It's good, like a pernicious ratch. I am back to close the year out with a bang. I can't believe y'all put me on the same episode as my boss. There's a lot of pressure here to, seem intellectual, perform, sound like I know what I'm talking about at any given moment. So thanks for that.
That's a little Christmas present to you.
All right. So it's funny because today, of course, like normally we start off all of our episodes, we'll do, of course, our Overdue Finds picks. But really today is just a big kind of like Overdue Finds segment. So what we're going to do today is, as with all of our year in review episodes, we're going to jump right into it. So let's start with books. What were some of your favorite titles that came out this past year? Richard, do you have a book that really stands out to you?
Well, I have three, but I'll start with one. One that really stands out for me this year is Clay Chapman's Whisper Down the Lane, which was it's a horror novel, but it's also an homage to classic horror films and books of the 1970s and 1980s, particularly the Satanic Panic of the time. And it name checks everything, from The Omen to, all of those slasher and horror films of the time. And it's quite a lot of fun.
Nice. I love that whole like Satanic Panic. I've talked on the show before about in the 80s. I remember going over to a friend's house and playing Dungeons and Dragons. Yeah. And I've told the story where I go home and I've had a blast playing Dungeons and Dragons. And my dad was kind of like, I really don't want you playing that game anymore because, people who worship Satan play Dungeons and Dragons, which is so funny because we weren't a religious family at all. But it kind of almost sounds like that title is kind of like a horror version of kind of like Ready Player One, where they have Ready Player One's got all these like kind of like sci-fi and geeky references, and this book kind of sounds like it's like the horror version of that.
Yeah, it's told from two points of view. So somebody in the time in the 80s, and then somebody more contemporary times looking back on that time, and it's really effectively done. It's quite good, and it's just full of Easter eggs. So I just loved it.
Nice. Did you have another title that you can recommend?
Two others that I really liked. Stephen Graham Jones, My Heart is a Chainsaw. He's the Blackfeet writer. from the States. And again, it's another homage to slasher movies. There's kind of a theme for me this year. But he name checks over 170 films of the time in that book, or makes references and allusions to over 170 films in the course of that book. So it's quite fantastic. And also Samantha Schweblin's Little Eyes. I don't know if you're familiar with that book. So that's more of a contemporary sci-fi, like really close contemporary sci-fi book about these little mechanical stuffed animals called Kentuckys that basically are occupied by somebody quite distant from you, and somebody who's not living in your house will animate and move these things around, but they can't talk. And then you basically have these things living in your house, and they just kind of see you go about your day. And it's about what would happen. And technologically, there's no reason why these things don't exist right now, and it's quite fascinating.
Yeah, it kind of sounds like I don't know why anybody would want that in their house, though.
Well, that's what she explores. She has like several different scenarios that she explores through the course of the book. Somebody who's wanting it for voyeuristic reasons, and then somebody else who just kind of happens upon one and just decides to let it live in their life, and then somebody else who's a child who has one as a companion, and all these kinds of different scenarios, and she plays them out over the course of the book, and it's awesome. Yeah.
I think you're missing the ultimate catch, which is that they are like creepy Furbies.
That's definitely what I was picturing in my mind.
I could see that totally being turned into a movie at some point. Like there seems to be some really good merchandising opportunities there, I think. Nancy, how about you? Like, what was like your favorite book that came out this year?
This was a tough year for reading. I feel like I've spent most of 2021 wrapped up in blankets, lying very still, looking at the ceiling, dreaming of faraway places. And I'm reminded of this because my Goodreads goal is way under. Like, I've never been this under. I feel this immense guilt whenever I look at Goodreads. And for a while, I was trying to motivate myself and be like, if you can read like one more book, you can go and buy like a burger. You can buy yourself that dress. Yeah, it wasn't motivational enough. But of what I did read, I read some really great titles. And my pick of the year is actually a YA novel called This Poison Heart by Kaylin Bayron. It's really cool to see more and more YA novels with Black protagonists come out, especially in fantasy and sci-fi. I've read quite a few of them. Hit me up if you want more recommendations. But this one is like about Briseis, who is this teenager who has the ability to control and manipulate plants, like think poison ivy. And one day, her adoptive mother, so she lives with her two adoptive mothers, who are this really cute, like bantering lesbian couple. I love them. But one day, her birth mother dies and wills her this giant estate. And of course, this estate is full of plants. And in it, there is a poison garden. So if you're not familiar with a poison garden, it's exactly what it sounds like. It's a real thing. Rich, like noble women would raise them. It's a garden full of the most poisonous plants you could think of. And of course, kind of begs the question, why would anyone have a poison garden? And as Briseis kind of explores more of her birth family and their legacy of witchcraft, she kind of finds out there's a lot of things underneath the surface, and that will help her realize and grow more familiar with her own powers. Because Briseis is kind of like any classic young superhero origin story, she is not good at controlling her powers. She's just trustful of it. She's like, what is this plant thing? It's just a really, really lovely novel. And I read it at the stroke of midnight after having driven a friend to the ER during the middle of a snowstorm. So the fact that I was able to kind of focus on this novel and enjoy it despite, literally everything else going on was a real testament to its power.
Nancy, at first I thought when you were saying the idea of treating books like earning rewards, that if you read one book, you would give your permission to go out and buy two more, because that is something librarians tend to do.
I definitely have considered that as well.
What I love about doing this podcast is it seems like every episode I learn something new. And today I learned all about poison gardens, and I didn't realize that was like an actual thing.
Yeah, some of these plants are like so poisonous, like you can't touch them at all. And of course, if you act like it's wild. Like I did a lot of reading on actual poisonous plants, and there's a really famous poison garden in England, and I really want to visit it.
Nice, as long as you don't touch anything.
Yeah, you have to have a tour guide, and like it's a very controlled environment.
Caroline, I'm really curious to see what, because you've recommended some really interesting sounding books over the year. What's your pick? Like, what's your favorite book from this year?
Not one that I've talked about on the show before. I got some new topics that I just wanted to share. The first one was one that really spoke to me personally, and that was Impact: Women Writing After Concussion, which was published earlier this year by the U of A, University of Alberta Press. And contributors include Rayanne Haynes, Jane Cawthorne, Edie Morin, a whole bunch of authors, writers writing in a number of different formats, poems, essays, different styles of writing about the experience of going through having a concussion, recovering, and in some cases, having a prolonged post-concussion period. I've talked before on the show that I have been recovering from a concussion for a couple years now, and it has absolutely changed almost every aspect of my life. And reading about the experiences of other people, even though the situations in which people suffered concussions are quite different, there are a lot of similarities and a lot of commonalities in the recovery experience. And so hearing about other people's experiences can feel very validating, and that you're not alone. And so this was one that I eagerly put on hold, and there are a couple copies of it now available from EPL. Then the other two choices that I had, because I also had three, Richard, I was right there with you, are kind of the other parts of my reading life. One of them is my unreliable narrator thriller genre, which this year I think Not a Happy Family by Sherry Lapena, who's a Canadian writer, writes they're books that all kind of feature a house in a darkness, and then the windows are lit up on it, and then the title is in like hot pink lettering. That's the kind of book this is. This one's about family gathers, two parents, their adult children. They all gather for Easter dinner, and then Easter Sunday dinner. Tuesday morning, the parents are discovered dead. Who did it? Why did they do it? It couldn't possibly be one of their children, could it? That type of thing. And then it's all about unweaving and going through. I totally see it as a movie. Really looking forward to maybe seeing an adaptation of that. And then my other genre, romantic comedies, People We Meet on Vacation by Emily Henry. She's the author of Beach Read, which I have talked about on the show, but this one is about two people, a man and a woman, who for years and years always went on vacation together until it happened. And what is it? You have to read to find out. But it changed everything, and now they no longer talk. So I leave you with those three books that wrap up my reading year. Bryce, what about you? What grabbed your attention this year?
Like Nancy, I didn't get to read nearly as much as I wanted to this year. And this is one I do struggle with. I always have the best intentions of reading way more. And I think what doesn't help for me is I've been working from home like really the last year and a half. And before that, I was really getting into a really good groove of listening to audiobooks on my commute into downtown and everything. And I just don't have that anymore. Like my commute is literally like, 5 seconds of walking from my bedroom to my dining room table to work. So this year, though, I was able to squeeze in a couple of books, and I've talked about this one already on the podcast. And but I just really enjoyed this book, and that, of course, is Yearbook by Seth Rogen. Actually, right now, if you go to our website, we also have a blog up called the Top 21 Overdue Finds of 21. And basically, for me, this is also my pick on that blog. And the one thing I love about this book is I recommend checking out the audiobook version, of course, because it is read by Seth Rogen himself. This is basically his kind of in funny short chapters, his life story. We hear about him growing up in just outside Vancouver. He becomes a stand-up comedian at the age of 14, and of course moves to Hollywood, and the rest is history. So yeah, like I said, this is a hilarious book. I talked about it on the few episodes ago, where the chapter I really appreciated for those of you who grew up in Western Canada. Of course, there's a whole chapter dedicated to the former chain restaurant Bonanza, and which I absolutely loved, and brought me back to a lot of family dinners growing up. So yeah, for me, just in a year once again where it's just so we get negative news all the time, Yearbook was the one title for me that really stood out.
Now, Bryce, I don't think any of the rest of us grew up in Western Canada. I'm getting head shakes and nods. So could you tell us a little bit more about Bonanza?
Yeah, so Bonanza, there used to be several locations here in Edmonton. Bonanza was a family steakhouse / buffet. So you would go in and you wouldn't have a waiter, but you would go in and there'd be a cashier there or somebody at the register, and you would they had their menu on the wall. So it'd be very similar to going in and ordering from McDonald's, and you would order your 6-ounce steak or whatever it was. You pick your side, and they would give you a tray with a plate, and you'd go sit down. The plate, of course, was for the salad bar. So that was one of the big attractions. They had this huge salad bar, of course, that you would go and fill up on before they brought you your steak or your burger or whatever. As a kid, it was awesome going to a salad bar and loading up on stuff like Jell-O and all that. Really
all the classic
stuff.
salads.
Croutons.
Exactly. A lot, just croutons and Jell-O. Yeah. So yeah, there used to be a few locations here in Edmonton, but yeah, it was kind of like a cheaper steakhouse with a, all you can eat salad bar at the very beginning.
I miss buffets though. Even as an adult, I always get the Jell-O. I do continue to love Jell-O, but I miss buffets in general. Just, I don't know, my eyes are very large, and I love Asian buffets in particular. If you've been, I don't know what they have out here. I haven't in Edmonton, but in the Toronto area, as a kid, just go load up, and yeah, your brother be like, "You can't finish all that." I'd be like, "Watch me."
I will say, I remember in high school there used to be a pizza place in Medicine Hat where my friends and I would go, and we would make absolute pigs of ourselves because it was all you can eat pizza, and just send in a bunch of 16-year-old boys, and they couldn't keep those pizzas coming out fast enough to feed us. So yeah, maybe Caroline, clearly we need to do a buffet episode of Overdue Finds.
I think so. We were tossing around some food ideas of how to capture the idea of talking about food on the podcast, and so I think I'm in. Let's jump over to music. What was your favorite song or album that was released in 2021? Richard, I'm going to start with you because I cannot wait to hear what you've picked.
Oh, well, again, no pressure.
No pressure. No one is under pressure today at all.
Okay, so these are just purely 3 very personally favorite picks. So my biggest guilty pleasure of 2021 was actually Lucinda Williams's It's Only Rock and Roll, a tribute to the Rolling Stones. So she did a series of concerts in 2021 or 2020 and 2021, that where basically she picked genres or artists that were instrumental to her development as an artist, and she would cover their work, and she would usually pick lesser known tracks, and she would stream these concerts. It was called Lou's Jukebox. And so episode 6 was what I started the year with. My wife and I watched her Rolling Stones concert on New Year's Eve, and then the album was later released in early 2021. And so I loved that record. And it's not particularly profound or anything like that, but hearing Lucinda Williams crank through some old Stones classics was really great. I think my absolute favorite album this year, though, was a really weird little record by a guy from Oakland, California, called Nerve Bumps. His name is Dax Pearson, and the album's called Nerve Bumps: A Queer Divine Dissatisfaction. And I could not stop listening to this record. You can find it in Hoopla. It's mostly instrumental electronic stuff, but the interesting thing, Dax is quadriplegic, and he basically built a studio around him to allow him to continue to perform music. He had been a musical performer, got in an accident, was confined to a wheelchair, and had to really re-engineer how he was actually going to perform and make music. And this album, although that is not how he defines himself as a musician, I mean, it comes out in the song titles and the tone of the album. Anyway, it's incredible 40 minutes of music, and I quite love it. And then I guess my third pick is Big Brave. So they're a trio from Montreal, Indigenous singer. They're on a label out of the States called Southern Lord, which is ostensibly a metal label, but they're really about as far from metal as you like. They're kind of like metal crossed with Godspeed You Black Emperor. And they are incredibly heavy, incredibly slow, radical feminist indigenous perspective on most of their things and song lyrics and stuff. And definitely outside of genre, quite a wonderful band. So, and given that they're from Montreal, when bands actually start really touring again, I'm hoping we'll see them out here at some point. So that'll be fantastic.
Richard, it's funny because I, of course, have joked on the show before. I've just very contemporary taste in music. Like, I like my classic rock or whatever. And I know just from following you on Twitter and having other conversations and stuff, when it seems like it's been forever since I've actually seen you in person.
Oh, no.
You always have really, I want to say kind of like eclectic music picks. Mm-hmm. And I've always wondered, where do you get your music recommendations? How do you hear about a lot of these groups?
Well, I spend a lot of time wading through stuff on Bandcamp and just in different blogs and things. And there's a magazine I read out of the UK called The Wire, which is really sort of left field music. And I get some picks from things from there. Their 2021 best of, it's actually their January 2022 issue just came out. It's the best of 2021, which is the issue that I live for, because then I get to wade through and see what I missed and what I got from their best of 2021 lists.
Bryce, when you say you're mostly contemporary, I just want to clarify, you mean adult contemporary, right? And not hip of the moment.
No,
the zeitgeist.
I used the wrong term there. Definitely not the current hits. Definitely more adult contemporary. When I was looking for my picks, I was it's funny because everybody lately has been sharing their Spotify list of these were my most listened to bands or songs, and I was like, wow, I've got a lot of Steely Dan on here.
They have a new album out too.
Do they really?
A new live recording that's coming out that I'm really looking forward to.
Ooh, nice. I'll definitely be checking that out. So that's where my music tastes lay a little bit.
All right. Well, we'll come back to yours, but first let's jump over to Nancy. What were you listening to this year?
Similar to Bryce, I have very basic B taste in music. I'm not very well. What's the musical equivalent to well read, well listened, well eared? Anyway, so my pick is not so much for the song, but for the music video, is Lil Nas's "Call Me by My Name," because if you haven't watched the music video, you should. Speaking of queer divine dissatisfaction.
Mhm.
It is very queer. It is very sacrilegious. It is extremely pandemic safe in that the only actor in the entire music video is Lil Nas. And I just remember experiencing this bubble of joy watching it. Yeah, so that's my pick. I'm sure we have his album in our collection, but I love it for the music video. Oh, Caroline's shaking her head. We don't.
Oh, we don't.
At the risk of taking us down another tangent, I very recently there was a Grammy nominees list that was put out on the day that the Grammy nominees. Well, it was recent when we're recording this, and that was a discovery I remember they made that because of how the music has been released, mostly through various streaming corporate entities, the library didn't actually have any of his Grammy nominated music that we could include on this list. And this is something that has come up a couple times around as we move into a streaming future with a change in both physical objects and ownership of material. What does that mean for libraries and what does that mean for access? But maybe things have changed in the time since the Grammy list and when we put this out. So if we have acquired Lil Nas X, it will be on our item list.
I was going to say, in those commercials with Lil Nas and Elton John for, what is it? Uber Eats, I think it is. Love those commercials. So good.
Bryce, what have you been listening to other than Steely Dan?
Besides Steely Dan, it's funny because, we were just talking about like stuff that, like Lil Nas, where it's not necessarily in our collection because we would love to carry it, but if it's only available through streaming or whatever, yeah, it's kind of tough. So my pick, though, I've got two picks. First of all, I want to talk, and I've talked about this album before on the show, and that of course is my favorite album that came out this year was Van Weezer by Weezer. This album was released earlier this year as a tribute to the late great Eddie Van Halen, and of course you can tell that Weezer are huge fans of Van Halen because they do an amazing job of taking you back to the mid 80s kind of hair metal heyday with this album. Speaking of kind of quarantine and COVID and everything, they released a video earlier this year called Hero. And what was cool about it is they had, like, of course, it was all socially distanced, and they had all these fans come in, or not come in, but they submitted videos of themselves like passing this piece of paper on to all these other fans. So if you get a chance to look that up, but Van Weezer by Weezer, we do actually have in our collection as a physical CD, so you can go and borrow it, and we also have it on Hoopla as well. My other pick, though, is something it's not in our collection. It just kind of reminded me of the Little Nas talk of. It's funny because Record Store Day is a fairly big deal, and there are a lot of vinyl collectors out there. And the Foo Fighters actually released an album specifically on Record Store Day, but they were called the DGs, and their album was called Hail Satin. And it's funny because the two sides of the album, the first side is them doing covering 5 hits by, well, 4 of them are from the Bee Gees, and the other one was from their brother Andy Gibb. So this is one of those ones where it was just a really fun listen, hearing, the Foo Fighters cover Night Fever and Shadow Dancing. The Shadow Dancing cover, by the way, is really good. So it's funny because I think some people will be like, that sounds awful. And I think it's going to be one of those things where if you do hear those covers, you're either going to think it's absolutely great, or you're going to think it's probably one of the worst things you've ever heard. But just the Foo Fighters singing, You Should Be Dancing and More Than a Woman was absolutely great, and it was one of my other favorite albums of this year. And unfortunately we don't have it in our collection, but only because like right now it's only available through like other streaming services like Apple Music. But yeah, if you're into vinyl collecting, maybe keep an eye out for that one.
I love the idea of when this episode comes out, maybe having some kind of poll thing around like Foo Fighters, Bee Gees covers, thumbs up or thumbs down, and
Yeah,
seeing kind of where people land on that.
exactly. Caroline, how about you? What are do you have a favorite album or song that came out this year?
Like you, I have talked about on the podcast, we usually bring in guests with musical knowledge because I'm firmly in the late 90s, early 2000s with my listening. Was going through, I thought maybe I would have to choose ABBA at one point because I'm pretty sure that might be the actual only full album from 2021 I've listened to. I also had a pick that is not in our collection, continuing the trend. The music from the Linda Lindas, which kind of had a breakthrough this year. It's an all-girl tween and teen band made up of young girls of Asian American and Latinx heritage in the States. They performed in the Netflix movie Moxie, and then at the Los Angeles Public Library, and yeah, they just kind of had a moment this year, and I'm really looking forward to what their next one might be as well. But I eventually landed on something we have in our collection, which is the soundtrack to WandaVision, the Disney Plus series that launched early in 2021. We don't have the episodes through EPL, but we do have the soundtracks that were released for each episode, and I highly recommend them. I think that they would stand on their own, even if you haven't seen the episodes. If you have, they just add so much more. They won one of the songs. I'm not going to say which one because it's a spoiler. Won the Emmy for Outstanding Original Song. The way that both Christoph Beck, who does the score for the episodes, and Robert Lopez and Kristen Anderson Lopez, the team behind Frozen and a whole bunch of other musicals, the way that they create theme songs for each episode of the show that reflect the era that they're depicting is just incredible. The music of it was definitely a highlight. I did not expect WandaVision to be my favorite of the MCU Disney Plus series this year. Like standing on the cusp of this year going into what are you looking forward to? WandaVision was not going to be my answer. So
Caroline, I've had that one song that you talked about stuck in my head all the time. Like I just hum it whenever. I don't even realize it. It's so good.
it's good, and then listening, like once it kind of broke through, listening to Robert and Kristen Anderson Lopez talk about how they had laid the groundwork for that song in all of the other episodes, so that once it hit, not only was it catchy, not only was it fun, not only was it kind of meant to be a jaw-dropping moment, you also were primed for it. It was familiar and mind-blowing at the same time, and which is kind of what TV is. And yeah, I am glad that I eventually landed on this as my music choice because I think it's a pretty emblematic one of me for this year.
All right. So one of my personal favorite categories here. Which game did you enjoy the most this year? Caroline?
Yeah.
How is it going with Best Fiends? Is that kind of your game of choice this year?
Well, Bryce, I have to tell you, I am up to level 2,675 with no
Whoa.
signs of stopping. Best Fiends continues to go strong. If anyone out there listening has a recommendation for a match 3 game I can play on my iPhone, I would love to hear them because that is really what I want to play. But I also have another one, and that is Hitman 3, which is
Oh.
available for PS4, 5, and Xbox One. Have you ever wanted to feel like a super spy in disguise at a black tie event? How about
Yeah.
as the detective in a Knives Out style murder mystery at an English manor? That's what Hitman 3 does. This is the final chapter in the recent Hitman series reboot. The game is very open ended in that it allows the player to achieve objectives however they see fit, often with hilarious and unpredictable results. I also have to come clean and say that this was not, in fact, my recommendation of the best of the year, but this choice belongs to past guest Mike Eaton, library services coordinator, guest on when we talked about the best and worst parents, video game guru, who was nice enough to let me share his pick for game of the year. So thank you to Mike for helping me to save a little face on this episode.
Jaw drop moment when you said Hitman 3. I'm like, Caroline,
I
what?
know.
What
I was
happened this year?
absolutely. I was like, "Whoa! Did you get like a PlayStation 5 or something like that? Like, good for you."
Yeah, no, every year I think maybe this is the year, but no. So yeah, and I should mention as well, Bryce, you referenced the blog post that's up on the website.
Mhm.
Mike's choice, which again, thank you, Mike, is one of the ones listed on there. So go and take a look at all of the amazing choices. I wanted to put so many things on hold while I was working on the list. So that's me.
I love that you brought in a ringer on this category. That's
Yeah.
so good, and it makes me so happy. I was just going to quickly say, I don't think you're a big Family Guy fan like I am, but there's actually a pretty fun Match 3 Family Guy mobile game. So if you're really dying for something new, there is that one.
I am still. I want to make it clear. I am still enjoying Best Fiends. It's not that I need to move away from that. It's just if there is another one, I'm always looking for the next great thing.
Nice. Richard, do you play many games at all?
No, and I'm ashamed to play. I'm ashamed to play. I'm ashamed to say I played, other than Limbo on my iPhone, I didn't play any games this year. So I'm an absolute blank, and I didn't have Caroline's foresight to come up with a ringer. I should have just talked to my 17-year-old son, but sadly I did not. So sorry about that.
It's taken me 4 years to figure out that I could just ask someone else for their recommendation.
Nancy, you always have some great picks. I'm trying to remember the name of the game you recommended last year, but I remember going and playing it. Like, I put it on hold after we talked, and it was the one where you got to build you use like child labor in it to build like this city, and like you're in this like wasteland.
Frostpunk. I was like, there are
Yes.
many games that involve child labor that I played. Frostpunk.
Anyway, that was a great recommendation. I think that was last year. What's your pick this year?
Okay, I've got 4 picks. I'm a big gamer. So one game that I think is going to appear on like all of the best of lists this year is Hades. Hades is a really great game. You play the son of Hades, Zagreus, and you're trying to escape the underworld, which is like your father's domain. But the really cool thing about this game is that as you try to pass through the levels, you will die and fail many times. But the game makes death rewarding in that you get to come back, and every time you go through the run, you get different powers. The more times you die, you actually become stronger, and it's just this really cool mechanic. And as someone who doesn't really tend to play a lot of hack and slash games, like that's not really my genre, it was really good because it rewards that frustration you might otherwise feel for dying so many times. So Hades, really good. One of my personal favorite franchises in video game series is the Ace Attorney Chronicles. You may have seen the memes of like objection, and a new addition to the series came out on Switch this year, which is the Great Ace Attorney Chronicles, and it takes place in 19th century Japan and England. So it's the ancestor of Phoenix Wright, who's the main character in the regular series. And like, if you've never played the Ace Attorney Chronicles, they are just absurd. Like, they are legal dramas. You have to go in, you're the lawyer, you point out all the contradictions in people's statements, and like, it's just surreal and strange. The characters are all like real bizarre and it makes me laugh. But at the same time, despite the characters all being like comedic and it's full of puns, I genuinely like grow to love a lot of them. And like even years later, I'm still like, oh man, I am so excited to see this one character make a cameo. Like I'm just in love with that entire series. Another great video game that kind of came out towards the end of this year that I don't think is getting as much attention as it deserves is actually Marvel's The Guardians of the Galaxy video game. It's based on the comics, not the movies. So that threw me a little bit because the character designs are comic based. But it's a really cool game in that the thing that stands out for me, like, you play the Guardians of the Galaxy, you're the team, you go through missions, is that it really implements the your decisions matter system in a way that it just implements it really well. So not just in the, you have to decide whether to save X person or Y person, but even in the conversational decisions, like one really good example is you have the option at one point to throw Rocket the Raccoon across like this chasm so you can land on the other side and get the motor on the other side going. And if you do, throughout the entire rest of the game, Rocket will like be pissed about it and will bring it up over and over again about how like you just don't value him. Like just these small social decisions, like the game at the end of the day is all about relationships. And so all of the relationship based decisions of whether you're nice to this person or you take this person's side over that person, like it actually affects everything in the entire game, which is really cool. Because I'm Mass Effect, I'm looking at you. You were not that great at implementing the, decisions in a way that was actually meaningful. And this is a good example. And then finally, and all these games are in our collection, I did check on this one, is Spiritfarer, which came out technically in 2020, but EPL acquired it in 2021. And this is a really great game where you play this girl named Stella, who is tasked to ferry the spirits of the dead to their final resting place. And it's a very warm game about grief and loss, very gentle, and also has a lot of resource management aspects, which I adore. So Hades, Spiritfarer, Guardians of the Galaxy, and the great Ace Attorney Chronicles, my top 4.
Ace Attorney, like the Ace Phoenix, right? Is that what? Phoenix, right. Thank you. That's a game I've always wanted to play, and I just, for whatever reason, have never gotten around to it. So that's cool that there's, they kind of go back in time to 19th century. So yeah, I'll definitely want to be checking that one out. And I've heard nothing but great things about the Guardians of the Galaxy game as well. It's funny because, Nancy, as you know, as a fellow gamer, sometimes those licensed property games are not always the best. And yeah, I've heard nothing but great things about it. It's good to know that you can really make Rocket Raccoon mad in that game, and he just keeps bringing it up to you.
Yeah, I was really pleasantly surprised. Agree with you, Bryce, that those licensed games can really be a hit or miss.
For me this year, it's funny because there's actually 2 games that I really wanted to play before we recorded this episode, but I didn't get a chance to, and I'll probably be talking about them on future episodes. These games just look really fun to me. Of course, it just came out like yesterday when we were recording this. The first one is the new Halo game called Halo Infinite, and I'm just really looking forward to that. Of course, it's like this Halo, of course, is like the Super Mario of Xbox. It's like their Mario franchise. And the other one is Aliens Fireteam Elite, just kind of like a sequel to the Aliens movies. But yeah, I'm going to be talking about those on a future episode of Overdue Finds. And of course, my one game, and it's funny because I've talked about this game a lot, and this is probably a very obvious pick. My personal favorite game this year was Call of Duty Vanguard. Of course, just a couple episodes ago, we chatted with Shelby Carlton, local writer who was a narrative designer on that game. And yeah, of course, Call of Duty, this one goes back to World War II. And of course, we do have it in our collection, and you can borrow it. But the one part of it that I thought was really neat this year, and it just came out as of like 2 days ago from when we were recording this episode, is they updated the Warzone map. So Warzone has been available for free for any console or PC users to download and play since really the beginning of the pandemic. Like I think it was like really March 2020. And as of a couple of days ago, they finally updated the map. Before you were playing in this Eastern Bloc European city called Verdansk. Now we're kind of shifting to the Pacific, and we're playing on an island called Caldera. So I just hopped into Caldera last night, did a few quick rounds to check out the map, and it's obviously very World War II inspired, but yeah, it's just a really fun game. It's a great way to join your friends online, and yeah, it's just a great way to kill some time.
That was almost my pick as well, Bryce. Not because I've actually played it, but because I would be able to come up with the name of it from talking with Shelby.
Nice.
Movies started heading back into theaters this year while also still getting big releases on various streaming services. What was your favorite movie or TV series from this year? Nancy, let's start with you.
Mm-hmm. So I will preface this by telling you a little bit about my family, which is that I'm the only one of my siblings who does not work in the animation industry. Both of my sisters, work for animation studios. One of my sisters actually is an animator and has a show coming out to Netflix soon. I forget what it is. I'm a bad sister. But anyway, so so even when like all of us were growing up, we were all obsessed with anime and cartoons, and even to this day, like I just love a good animated show. So my pick of the year is the animated show Kipo and the Wonder Beasts, available on Netflix, but also available on DVD, seasons 1, 2, and 3 in our collection. It takes place in this kind of post-apocalyptic world where animals have just mutated beyond control to the point where they control like the top side of the earth, and the remaining humans have to hide in a bunker. And Kipo, our fearless heroine, gets separated from the rest of her bunker and has to survive in this mutated animal world. And like the color palettes in the show are gorgeous. Like they're bright, they're funky. Like the entire show is very funky. I'm making it sound like kind of dark and dystopian and gritty, and it's really not. Like you have all these bizarre talking animals. It's just so bright, but at the same time, it really deals with a lot of tough topics, like these mutated animals who are now very intelligent and self-aware have this distrust of humans and vice versa, and they're humans who want the animals to go back to the way they used to be. And so like there's a lot of really good power struggles and really dynamic characters in it, and has a really great soundtrack too.
Nice. Cool animation and great music. That sounds really fun.
Good. Richard, how about you?
Well, I really enjoyed The Harder They Fall, which I saw quite recently on Netflix. That was, I love Westerns. I was kind of raised on Westerns. My grandfather, every time we go to visit, that's what we would do in the evenings, is watch old Westerns. And I mean, I recognize there's so many bad things about Westerns and some of the tropes and themes and things like that. But I thought that The Harder They Fall was really a great revisionist Western that still held on to sort of what was good about the genre, while sort of reinventing some of those tropes, I guess. And Idris Elba also had a TV series. This is for 2020, but I don't know. Are you familiar with his TV show in the Long Run? Do you know that program?
No.
So it's a British comedy drama series that he does. And it's loosely based on his childhood in 1970s Britain and the immigrant experience growing up in London and stuff like that. It's really clever. It's not laugh out loud funny, but it is very warm and very insightful. And it's got a great soundtrack, a lot of sort of 1970s Afrobeat and sort of reggae and stuff in there about teenage life in 1970s Britain. Anyway, I love that. So I know it came out, the third season came out in 1920, or 1920, sorry, 2020.
Wow, Idris Elba looks great for his age.
He does. That's right. Anyway, those are my two picks. Harder They Fall, I guess both Idris Elba properties, as it were, right? The Harder They Fall and In the Long Run.
his career is just such an interesting one. The projects that he picks and what he works on, and when you see it, there's an unexpected quality to some of his roles.
Yeah, I think he's always so good. He's just very versatile, right?
I personally am hoping he's going to be our next James Bond.
Oh, that would be great.
Bryce, how about you? What movies did you like this year, or TV?
Well, I'm going to name one. Unfortunately, it's not in our collection right now. I'm hoping it will be in the future. It was a movie that you can only watch on Apple Plus streaming service, but it's called Finch, and it stars Tom Hanks. And the movie's set in the future, kind of in a post-apocalyptic Earth where basically the temperatures are so extreme that you can't go out in the day without some layers of protection on. But what's cool about it is it's kind of similar in a way to Castaway, because this movie is really like, it's all Tom Hanks. And so basically in the movie, he plays this inventor, and he's got a dog, and Tom Hanks, and this is not a spoiler because you see it in the trailer, but he's dying. So he's got a dog that he loves more than anything in the world, and he's an inventor. So he invents this, he creates this robot that he's trying to kind of train to take care of his dog for when he does eventually die. So they need to kind of go cross country in their RV to kind of get some other parts and everything. And it's just a great movie that nobody really seems to be talking about. But I think it's mostly because of, like, I don't think a ton of people probably subscribe to Apple Plus, but yeah, I subscribe just specifically to watch this movie. And unfortunately, it's not in our collection, but it is far and away my absolute favorite movie that did come out this year. And another one that I really liked is, and I talked about this on the show before, is Nobody, starring Bob Odenkirk from Better Call Saul. So this one, if you saw the trailers for it, you're like, oh, this just kind of looks like a John Wick wannabe movie. Does have obviously similar beats as John Wick, but this movie stands on its own. It's a lot more I guess, light than John Wick is. And Bob Odenkirk, for somebody who, you look at him and you don't think like action hero or action star, does an amazing job of playing this kind of what appears to be this kind of very common accountant, and then it turns out he's got this past which kind of makes him this like unstoppable kind of like dark CIA agent. So there's a fight scene on a bus, and it's one of the best action sequences that you'll probably see in the movies this year. So Nobody is in our collection, and definitely check that out. It's a great Friday, Saturday night, grab some popcorn flick. Caroline, how about you?
My first choice also came out at the tail end of 2020, but with my theory of what is time, and as well as who was going to a movie theater in December of 2020, especially here in Edmonton. It was released on streaming in January 2021, and that is Promising Young Woman, starring Carey Mulligan as a woman who can't move on from her traumatic past, and so lives a life that is full of anger and vengeance and revenge. Really, Emerald Fennell directed it. She also wrote it and won an Oscar for her screenplay. And the casting in it, all I want to do is talk about the casting with this movie. Bo Burnham's performance. He plays the boyfriend character to Carey Mulligan, and I've thought about his performance all year long. It is incredible, both what the story has him do, but what he brings to it. Just a lot to think about. And then on a completely different emotional journey. I have Barb and Star go to Vista Del Mar. Have any of you seen this movie?
No, I'm aware of it. I remember seeing the ads for it. It looked pretty funny.
It was. It stars Kristen Wiig and Annie Momolo, who also co-wrote the movie, and it's about two best friends from the Midwest who go on an epic once-in-a-lifetime trip to Florida. They both kind of fall in love with Edgar, who is played by Jamie Dornan, and he is a henchman to a supervillain who is also played by Kristen Wiig, and they get wrapped up in this plot. The character is funny. It's silly. That is the word for this movie. It's just silly, fun, good times. It's bright, it's colorful, and it was just what I needed in this year at that point to experience it. And then rounding it off, I have one last pick, which is Shiva Baby, written and directed by Emma Seligman. Danielle, a young woman, is at Shiva for a family friend, funeral wake experience in the Jewish tradition. She is there along with her parents and her married sugar daddy benefactor and her ex-girlfriend and all of her parents' friends. So there's a lot going on for her, and it's a very short movie. It's less than an hour and a half. It's incredibly tense, uncomfortable, stressful. I read one review that called it "uncut gems for Gen Z women," because it is just. I went into it thinking it was going to be more comedy than it was, and so it took me a while to get on the right tone for it, but just that uncomfortable, claustrophobic, watching her try to be herself in front of all these people who know her in slightly different ways. It was a really interesting movie that I recommend people checking out. So that was Shiva Baby. So let's move on to our roundtable questions. The first one, what is one older title that you read, watched, listened to, etc. this year that you've been meaning to and finally did? Richard?
Oh, so many to choose from. Am I restricted to one?
No.
Okay, I'll do two. So
when Bryce puts me in charge of the roundtable questions, anything goes.
Okay, so these will be quick though. One, Ibram Kendi's How to Be an Anti-Racist. I'm reading this book for the third time. I love that book. It's so wise and it's quite easy to read, but there's so much in there to digest and absorb. I'm loving that, so I'm reading that for the third time. On a totally different tangent, I also really enjoyed City on a Hill. I hadn't seen that when it first came out on Showtime, the Kevin Bacon series. Kevin Bacon playing this jaded, ethically compromised FBI agent. It's dark, it's violent, it's clever, it's sometimes laugh out loud funny. I loved it. Yeah.
Kevin Bacon aged into that jaded persona really well.
Oh yeah, he's just it's kind of a small revelation, right? Like he's not what you expect at all, but he does it so well. Yeah.
Yeah. Great. Nancy?
My older title I finally got around to is Umberto Eco's The Name of the Rose, which is like a medieval monk plays Sherlock Holmes.
Have you seen the movie?
There's a movie? Oh.
There's a movie. Now it's quite different than the book, but it's also a blast.
I'll have to watch it.
Bryce, how about you?
Well, a while ago I think it was on Reddit or something, there was this thread on there about like, oh, what's like the most like disturbing movie you've seen? And I was just reading through this thread and there is this movie that I've seen on other lists as well. It was like most like depressing movies, most, just kind of just disturbing, uncomfortable watches. And this movie is from 1982. It's a Russian film set during the Second World War, and it's called Come and See. And this one, there's just a brand new Criterion release for it. And this, by far, in my opinion, and mostly, if you read reviews of it, is probably one of the best World War II movies. And it's about this young man who he's like 15, 16 years old, and it's kind of at the tail end of the Second World War, and he joins this group of like resistance fighters, of course against his family's wish, and of course they're trying to battle Germany. And just the movie is just like these really disturbing instances that just kind of keep happening to him as he tries to join these fighters. And just World War II in general is just very dark, and this movie just kind of shows some other stuff that we don't normally see in a lot of movies. And it's just a very disturbing watch. It's one of those ones very similar to like Requiem for a Dream, where it's like you should watch it, but you're only going to watch it once, and I'm good after that. So yeah, come and see.
I'm pretty sure I read a list somewhere online that was like the best movies you'll only watch once.
Yes. Yeah, definitely. Caroline, how about you?
Very early on, somewhere along the way, I got in my head the idea that Ordinary People was a movie for grown-ups. And so that crystallized a desire for me to watch it. I was scrolling through Canopy one day and was very pleased to discover that Ordinary People, the 1980 movie starring Mary Tyler Moore, Donald Sutherland, and Timothy Hutton, was in fact available on Canopy. So I sat down and just enjoyed some good old-fashioned family drama.
Did you like it though?
Yeah, I did. Like the performance, it's characters who are repressed and grieving and sad and horrible at times, and people really struggling. But the performances were really, really well done. So it had that going for it. Second roundtable question. Time magazine always names a person of the year. In 2019, it was Greta Thunberg. 2020 was Joe Biden and Kamala Harris. Who would you name as the Overdue Finds Person of the Year 2021, Nancy?
I really had a tough one with this, and I think my answer is just I no longer believe in Person of the Year. Like,
Ooh.
I think it's an antiquated concept. And if I had to absolutely name one, I would say we should all give ourselves a clap on the back for making it through another tough year and just, being present and here. And I know it's a kind of a cheap answer, but I've decided it's just Person of the Year is no longer my thing.
It's what Time magazine did in 2006 or 7. You were the Person of the Year. Richard?
Well, mine's kind of a cheap answer also, but in a different way. I'm just going to throw out Bob Ross as being the Person of the Year for 2021 for the Overdue Finds Person of the Year. I mean, there was a documentary about his life came out this year, which revealed a side of him that I don't think any of us or many of us were aware of. And other than that, he just seems like he would be the Overdue Finds Person of the Year were he still around. So there you go, Bob Ross.
That was a really good documentary too, and kind of makes you second guess maybe buying any Bob Ross merch.
Yes, definitely.
Bryce?
This one was really tough for me too. Last year I named an athlete, and I'm going to go with one again, and that of course is Edmonton's own Alphonso Davies. There's lots of awesome and amazing Canadian athletes this year, but you take a look at last month where we had over 40,000 people jam-packed sitting almost in a blizzard watching Team Canada play against Team Mexico in the middle of November, and he's gotten sports fans like myself who soccer I've never really been interested in. I just couldn't get into it. I've watched my first full soccer game on TV because of, Team Canada and the story of Alphonso Davies and just that whole that whole kind of story with his family coming to Edmonton, and he's now one of like the best soccer players in the world. So yeah, I'm gonna go Alfonso Davies, and also too, he'd be a dream guest for Overdue Finds.
Oh yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Caroline, how about you?
My answers for this one always go a little closer to home. This year, no exception. Bryce, you're my person of the year for this year.
What?
The people at home have no idea how much editing you did this year for the podcast through various circumstances, and I am very aware of how many takes I screw up and how many times my laughter ruins what is otherwise a good take. All the episodes got out on time with deliverables met, and that's really thanks to you. So I have to go with you as my pick.
Oh, thanks, Caroline. It's a team effort, though. It's not just me. It's lots of yourself and Camila and Maria and Meg and Kathy. You've got an awesome team here at EPL who helps put all of our episodes together.
It is, and if it was People of the Year, I would have named all of us. So.
Yeah.
Yeah. So looking ahead to 2022, what release are you most looking forward to in 2022, Nancy?
I am a Lord of the Rings geek all the way, and there's supposed to be the new Lord of the Rings TV show coming out in fall 2022. I am very curious about that one.
And this is set prior to the Lord of the
I believe
Rings?
so, yeah. Tolkien wrote like so much history. Like there's so much to choose from. I can't remember what specific era it takes place in, but there's so much to mine in terms of the history of Middle Earth.
Right now, Kate Gibson's Tolkien sense is going off because she would know what era it's going to be set in. So she's experiencing that sensation and doesn't know why.
I was going to say, if you go back and listen to just a couple episodes ago, our Lord of the Rings episode, Kate does let us know which era that series will be set in. So check that out.
Good. Richard?
Well, this is already out. There's a Velvet Underground documentary on Apple, which I'll be watching over Christmas. So I'm really looking forward to seeing that, but that's not a 2022 flick. I think a lot of people probably looking forward to the third season of Ted Lasso. It'll either be fantastic or it's going to jump the shark. We'll see. I guess let's wait and see. And then I'm also very excited. Like I'm an older music buyer. I still buy music. I still download stuff. And I still follow labels. So there's a label out of New York called Backwoods. They're a sort of a New York indie hip hop label, and they've just had the past 3 years have just been stellar for them. Everything they have released has been just like gold, but quite diverse. And so I'm just looking forward to whatever they deliver me in 2022 because I'm expecting great things. So Backwoods, yes, with a Z.
Exciting. With a Z.
Yes.
Okay. Bryce, you learned earlier about the Steely Dan live album that's coming up. Yep. Other than that, what are you looking forward to?
Other than the live Steely Dan album, I think this is actually my pick last year, and it just with everything being in theaters and getting delayed. So it is official. I saw it's coming out May long weekend, the Bob's Burgers movie.
Oh, cool.
Caroline, I know you'll be there as well. I'm so pumped up for that. I know there's some big movies coming out next year, but for me, Bob's Burgers movie is like my number one thing to go watch. How about you, Caroline?
Marry Me, starring Jennifer Lopez and Owen Wilson. I don't know if you have seen the trailer for this. If you haven't, go and watch it right now. Jennifer Lopez plays a pop star, the biggest star in the world, who's going to get married live in like Madison Square Garden or somewhere like that to her musician fiance. It's going to be the biggest deal. It's going to be live streamed, and then they're going to go on like a honeymoon tour where they go around the globe. But oh no, he's cheating on her, and she's humiliated because she found out 5 minutes before the ceremony. So Owen Wilson, who's been dragged along to the concert by his teenage daughter, happens to be holding a sign that the daughter made, I think, that says "Marry me, Jennifer Lopez's character's name. And she looks at him and she's heartbroken because she's humiliated and her heart's broken and everything is going wrong. And she looks at him and she goes, all right, let's do it. Let's get married. So she drags Owen Wilson out of the crowd. They get married, total strangers to each other, live streamed in front of the world. And now what happens next?
Sounds incredible.
Yeah.
I can't wait. The trailer has been giving me life this last month. I think it comes out around Valentine's Day, sometime in February, and I am really looking forward to it.
And have you been rewatching the trailer? Like,
I've seen it a few times.
Okay.
Can you imagine if I was like, no, just the once, and like I had all of like these tiny little details memorized already. Yeah, I've seen the trailer a few times.
Okay, good.
I mean, I think you could stand to watch it more because you didn't remember Jennifer Lopez's character's name, right?
No, I've got a few more coming, as well as like her fiance, like the guy who's cheating on her. He's also, I think, an actor, performer, musician, someone whose name I'm blanking on. So I've got a few more rewatches before I go into it.
So thank you so much for joining us today, Nancy. Is there anything coming up at EPL that you think people should check out?
Absolutely. So everyone can look forward to this, but starting in December, right after Christmas, EPL is doing the 12 Days of ELF, and ELF is early literacy fun. So there's going to be 12 videos released. It's aimed at, families with young children, but honestly, I find myself humming or singing these to myself. There's going to be a song or rhyme each day. My team has spent a ton of effort putting them together with filming, shooting, editing. It's super cute, and it's sure to put a smile on your face.
Great. So this comes out New Year's Eve. So go back, take a look if you've missed any, and stay tuned for the ones coming up next.
Mm-hmm.
And Richard, what are some things people could find at the Milner Library these days?
Well, I think over the holidays, if people are looking for something to do, they should definitely come down and check out our wall, The Wall. There is several exhibits screening on the wall, which you can find the show times for those on our website. Come down and check out the Makerspace with its recording studios and printers and laser cutters and sewing machines and 3D design software and things like that. I think the people will have a lot of fun over the holidays. Should just come down and just check out the new library if people haven't seen it yet. It's still a wonderful, beautiful space, and the holidays would be a great time to visit. So, yeah.
Thank you both so much for joining us today. For our listeners, we hope you've enjoyed today's episode. Make sure that you've subscribed to the show so that you get all of our new episodes, including the bonus ones that you never know when we might be dropping one. Please also leave us a review on Apple Podcasts. And most importantly, please tell a friend about the show. You can make it your New Year's resolution to do so.
Yeah, please do. And don't forget that we'll have a link to everything that we talked about in today's show notes, as well as a link to that blog that we talked about earlier in the show, where we share the top 21 overdue finds of 2021. And as always, we love to hear from our listeners. You can reach us on Twitter at epl.ca or email us at podcast@epl.ca. Send us a note and let us know what your favorite maybe book or movie or game was from this year. Thank you for listening, and we'll see you next year.